program. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
Well, good evening. Once again, it's Monday evening, and we're here at the studios of One Radio with your voice with the NRP. This program is sponsored by the Nevis Reformation Party, the oldest and most transformative political party in the history of Nevis. Tonight, we've got in the studios leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge, and Deputy Leader, the Honorable Cleone Stapleton. We will talk about the budget delivered last Tuesday, December 7th, the Appropriation Bill 2022-2021. We'll talk about that. But of course, there are many other issues that we will talk about. It's very cold and rainy on the outside. It's frigid almost up in Gingerland from whence I came. But Nevisians at home and in the diaspora, you're in the comfort of your homes. Buckle in, because we've got an hour and a half. We'll take it up to 10 o'clock, where we will discuss issues which impact your lives and your livelihoods. And let me tell you that since the budget is a vehicle which charts the course for the next fiscal year, it will impact all our lives and livelihoods. And so your calls are invited from the very get-go. We're in for an exciting night. Grab your coffee, or if you're like me, some hot chocolate, and let's talk issues affecting life in our island home, Nevis. Good evening, Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge. How are you?
Good evening, Mr. Manners. I am doing well, considering the temperature that you just spoke about.
It's cold.
It is indeed cold, and there was a brief shower on my way in. But nonetheless, we must persevere, notwithstanding the conditions. And I would just like to say good evening to my colleague, Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons, and those friends near and far who are joining us tonight and would want to hear a little bit more about the happenings in Nevis from the NRP's perspective and the voice of the NRP.
Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons, good night. What was the drive like coming in from the great parish of St. Thomas?
It was good evening. Good evening, everyone. Those of you listening to my voice and tuned in to your voice with the NRP. A few showers on the way here, but I'm happy that I am able to be in studio to join you, Steve, as well as Dr. Janice Daniel this evening. And I take this opportunity to express sincerest condolences to a few families who are presently mourning the loss of a loved one. I express sincerest sympathies to the family of the late Roger Hanley, both Keandre Hanley and the family there, the entire Hanley family there in Jessops.
That's absolute news to me.
Yes, he passed sometime last week, and so I know the family is grieving at this time, and we just want them to know that they are in our thoughts and prayers. I also express sincerest condolences to Mr. Lon Daniel and Colleen. They are in Westbury and the passing of their daughter. We trust and hope that they may find comfort in the bosom of God during this very difficult time. And so our thoughts and prayers are also with them.
And I see this morning you went to visit an icon in the St. Thomas's community. Always so good when we can touch those who are older, those who need our comfort, and those who have charted a course for our island.
Yes, indeed. Actually, that photo was taken some time, maybe about 3 weeks ago, when I did my usual outreach, and we were visiting the elderly in our community. And so, yes, I did visit Mr. Tyson.
Yes, he has been an iconic figure.
Indeed.
Especially in the area of fishing, which is so important in the parish of St. Thomas. And over the weekend, Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge, you were in the great village of Bricklin.
I was indeed, and it's one of a series of visits that I organize, and The whole idea behind the appreciation breakfast is to provide an opportunity to engage with the citizens in the community, the villagers, and to listen to some of their concerns. What we have done is to include a poem competition and a song competition, and that allows the villagers to express their thoughts about their village. And we have had some quite interesting poems submitted, which really reveal a lot about the villages that we would not ordinarily know. And so this is really an opportunity for people to, whether they want to be proud or they want to complain, they can put it in the form of a poem or a song. And you know, of course, there's a small prize that they can win. And so this is something that was started early in November, and we've done quite a number of villages, and each one, you know, it gets better and better. I know the folks at Fountain would say that none can be better than theirs, because they did come out in their numbers, and they did really participate in a significant way. The next stop would be in camps and the surrounding area. We're looking at the scheduling. It may be early next year, but I would just want the folks in camps and the surrounding area, as well as Newcastle, to know that they're not forgotten, they're not left out. Their turn is coming up next. And so persons, I think some persons actually started writing poems even before we announced where we were going to be. And so that just gives you, you know, an idea of how people are excited to participate and to contribute and to feel proud about their villages, etc., which is not something that you see every day. And so I'm very happy that we are able to organize such an activity and to get the community involved in that way.
Now, of course, Your Voice with the NRP is a program which focuses on our island home, and by extension, St. Kitts and Nevis, the federation in which we live. But of course, we live in a global village, so we have to look at what is happening around us. And in Anguilla, the island which once formed part of the unitary state of St. Christopher, Nevis, and Anguilla, Saturday, December 11th was a red letter day. I'm sure you all saw the pictures, you saw the videos, you saw the American Airlines flying non-stop from Florida, flying over that beautiful Anguilla sign and into the Clayton, what is it? Clayton Thomas, is it? Airport, the name there, I think. I may have got the last name wrong. But a very signal day for the people of Anguilla. Very interestingly, Shelia Rogers Webster, who is a top figure at the tourist board in Anguilla, indicated that the Anguilla government does not have to guarantee any flights. American Airlines took the leap of faith and flew into Anguilla on its inaugural flight, and then at 4 o'clock it left. I watched the video relay from the tarmac at the airport there, and it thrilled my heart. Now let's come back to our island home, because Dr. Hodge, your father, in an earlier dispensation, had a vision for Nevis. So the Mount Nevis Hotel came in the late 80s, and then the Four Seasons Hotel came February 14th, 1991. And he wanted to carve out a niche for the island of Nevis. And he did everything. He fought tooth and nail to get funding for what we used to call the bambouche on Newcastle Airport. As a matter of fact, working through then Prime Minister Dr. Kennedy Simmons, who found an ally in Sir James Mitchell, bless his soul. He's going to be buried in Beckway on Saturday. He had sought and gained funding for an airport in his island home, Beckway, 7 square miles, one of the small islands of the Grenadines. But what your father was trying to do was to carve out a niche for Nevis in high-end tourism, and he did much in that regard. And so the Vance Amway Airport came, and the word international was attached to the end of it. Now, between 2007 and 2013, from these very microphones, the person who is now Premier of Nevis lamented that nothing was being done at the Van Samry International Airport simply because then Premier figured it had the name of Mr. Van Samry. Enter 2013. Said Mr. Brantley becomes Minister of Tourism on Nevis. Come 2015, Minister of Aviation in the federal government of St. Kitts and Nevis. 2017, he becomes the Premier of Nevis. And then, of course, in February of 2019, he told us that in collaboration with John L. Powell of St. Kitts, he was bringing B&L worldwide. For 15 months, we heard nothing. And then at a press conference on June 25th, 2020, he announced that the plans were being scaled back. The important thing to note, that 9 years in government, the Van Samry International Airport has regressed. Some folks are making joke on Facebook. They say only FedEx planes come there. Shelley from just up the road, Auntie Shelley, has said, not na Cape. Now, if Anguilla, who was third in the pecking order, St. Kitts, of course, the central government, they were normally number one. Nevis, a distant cousin sometimes, and Anguilla way down the pecking order. If they on Saturday, December 11th, can have flights, a direct, non-stop flight from Miami, what are we doing in Nevis? Dr. Daniel Hodge, what are we doing?
Mr. Manners, that's a very loaded question, because you probably know where I would take this. In the same breath of speaking about the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis and our reliance on St. Kitts for sustenance and the lack of developing any new initiatives to build Nevis or to develop Nevis. Unfortunately, the VW airport is one of the casualties. And so we would recognize that, you know, there are numerous flights coming into St. Kitts. And when it's convenient, we refer to St. Kitts and Nevis. And when it's not convenient, we refer to Nevis on its own. Well, one of the things that I can say is, looking at the Nevis Statistical Digest, which is really a source of information for Nevis, we would see that up to 2018, which is when the last report was provided, the VWA airport would have seen its lowest movement of people. Back in, for example, 2010, we saw like 24,000 people move in. 2015, 20,000 persons. 2017, we were at 19,000. And in 2018, we are down at 14,000. And as you correctly said, the airport is really regressing, and left up to this administration, we feel eventually the airport is going to be of very little service except for the shipment of as a courier service. Mm-hmm. We really do need to look at where Nevis is going, where we want to see Nevis going, what direction, and put the necessary resources behind building and developing the airport as part of that overall project.
Well, of course, we have heard the bizarre position that progress in St. Kitts is progress in Nevis. But as I said, your father was trying to carve out a unique niche for Nevis within the Federation. So you can have an international airport on St. Kitts, but you can still do business here, which absolutely is not happening. As a matter of fact, a few years ago when the taxi pier was opened over at Oli, we saw the Premier parading figures to say how many people moving from Nevis to St. Kitts. I found that bizarre, because what you want to do is attracting new money into the Federation, new people connecting with Miami and hopping into flights and coming here. Moving the dollar from Orly Beach to Reggae Beach really doesn't add any great benefit to what we're trying to do here. Can you make any sense of this, Leon Simmons?
Well, I think a practical approach perhaps ought to be given, and we have to bear in mind that even though we saw a decrease in air traffic at the Vance W. Amri International Airport, there has been some increase in traffic in the port, travel by sea. Now, some people may argue that that really it's convenient for those persons to come through St. Kitts if they can take a water taxi over to Nevis and be in Nevis for 5 minutes. Whilst that may be so, I think a holistic approach should be taken, because you cannot really abandon one particular mode of transportation and then just focus on the other, which is sea transport. So it definitely would be more beneficial to Nevis to actually have both and have that balance and give people the option. I think that is what is lacking. People really don't have the option really to travel directly into Nevis, and that is needed. And if the option is there and people opt to still coming to St. Kitts and then take the water taxi over, then of course that is their choice. But it should not be where you don't have a choice at all. And so, of course, we all can agree that that definitely would lead to further development of Nevis. And it really makes no sense to have an airport labeled as an international airport if you don't have any quote-unquote international activity. That really doesn't make any sense. And so surely the next administration, which I no doubt believe would be an NRP-led administration, that is definitely something that would be at the forefront of our focus to actually increase the traffic in air travels to the Vance W. Amri International Airport.
Well, one of the things which Anguilla has done in carving out their niche is allowing tourists coming in to bring their jets in. And we know that for years, people destined for the Four Seasons in Nevis have been parking at the RLB, parking in St. Martin, and even in Anguilla. So it's all about carving out a niche. But there seems to be no major plan afoot. BL Worldwide was supposed to make it into an international hub, and poof, that has gone with the wind. Now, another matter in the field of tourism, probably the best kept secret. I knew about it 3 weeks ago. The word was on the street. The Premier definitely didn't mention it in his press conference. I don't know if he did at the budget session, because I didn't hear all of it. But as we are dead in the winter season, the CEO of the Tourism Authority has said enough is enough. I'm on my way. She has resigned. Have you heard that as well?
I have, but I have not heard any formal confirmation, but I have heard that through the grapevine. And so it is not surprising, because it must be difficult taking on a position like that, particularly with her not being so familiar with Nevis. And she did indicate that that it was perhaps, her first time taking on a position in tourism, directly in tourism. I know she has done other stuff in terms of marketing and promotion and things like that, but actually tourism, I think that was her first time. And so with, as Auntie Shelley would coin, nothing a kip in tourism, the weight of it really would have rested on her shoulders, so to speak. And so it would have been challenging for anybody, and the pressure mounting, and then without that support, because I can recall that she was a guest on the legendary show not too long ago, and in that sitting, persons would have been asking questions about, what are your plans? What are your plans to really develop tourism in Nevis? How are you going to appeal to a niche market and things like that? And so, she had some challenges in even responding to simple questions. And so that really led me to believe that, there was pressure and real pressure.
Yes, that I've heard myself. Now, the Minister of Tourism and Premier has always been keen to say, especially in the area of road construction, that we keep it local. Mm-hmm. We trust our people. Do you expect to see him moving to, say, a Devon Liburd, a Tamika Lawrence, empowering a Nevision to do that job, marketing the destination?
That's an interesting question, Mr. Manners, because I think one of the reasons why CEOs and PSAs would struggle is because there's no clear direction, there is no vision and no plan that you're working towards. And so everything would appear as an opportunity, but if it's not within the context of the overall plan, then you can find yourself, grabbing at everything and really getting nothing. And so whether it is someone local or someone from abroad, I think anybody will struggle if there is no clear direction in, with regards to where the country is going. We would have spoke about, developing heritage tourism. We would have spoken about developing sports tourism. And so definitely if we know the direction in which we are going, then the person to fill a position such as that would be able to contribute and move forward that idea and to make it a realistic development of the tourism product. So it's not easy to say who it would be or ought to be, but under an NRP-led administration we would know clearly what we're trying to develop and ensure that we have the right fit. And what they say, you can't put round pegs in square holes and expect to get results. And so, as our colleague J.D. Keynes always says, you must have a policy directive, and people must know what is expected, what are their standards, what are their indices of success, etc. And so I think that is where people would be struggling, and you see people being removed and replaced, but there's no clear direction. That's the way they should be going.
Dr. Daniel, I have a question for you, because you always say that there is no clear direction, but I want to know, how do you expect clear direction with 3 senior ministers sitting in the federal cabinet and having to travel to St. Kitts almost daily to ensure that they are able to perfect their respective portfolios there? Like, how do you get direction from that? Because I do believe that is the problem. There is indeed a lack of focus, and when we talk about focus, I want Nevisions to really understand how difficult it is, because as human beings sometimes I think we like to let our imagination run wild, but it is really, really very difficult to do 2 full-time jobs. And so, as a resultant of the senior ministers, that is the premier, the honorable premier, and the deputy premier, as well as the member for Nevis 4, and they hold some very heavy portfolios in Nevis. So if they have to be in St. Kitts for the majority of the duration of a working week, then how can there be any strategic focus or planning in order to move Nevis forward? And this is the challenge. It goes beyond obtaining 2 salaries. I'm not talking about the salaries or the money or anything like that. I'm just saying how difficult it is. And anybody who ever had to work 2 full-time positions at the same time, and I have been in that position. I recall not too long ago I was a manager at an international bank, being the compliance officer, and then still having to juggle my own private law firm simultaneously, and it is indeed difficult. So if I am struggling in that way, and I am a private, citizen operating in the private sector, I can't imagine, or can the public just imagine how difficult it is for any person who have two public portfolios that they are expected to deliver, how challenging it will be for them to focus. You cannot serve two masters. It doesn't matter how much you try. One of them would suffer. And that is exactly what we are seeing happening in Nevis. Unfortunately, Nevis is suffering. And that is the resultant of that arrangement. And that is why we in the NRP, we have said time and time again that when the people of Nevis elect an NRP-led administration, what they are going to get persons who are dedicated, persons who are focused, who wake up every morning willing and ready to work and commit to the people of Nevis.
So do you still want me to answer?
Sure, you can add your 2 cents.
Well, I'll add my 20 cents.
Yes.
I'll add my 20 cents because the reality of the situation is that the people of Nevis were misled into thinking that having 3 NIA ministers in the federal cabinet would be beneficial to Nevis. Unfortunately, that is not the case. What we have said over and over again is that these ministers in Nevis, who already have a full-time position, must now assume a different portfolio under the under the federal government. And so, for example, Minister Eric Evelyn is not the Minister of Environment in NIA, but he represented the Federation at COP26. That was clearly a federal responsibility, a federal role that he was playing. The problem that we have, and I heard it mentioned, Alexis Jefferson mentioned it in the at budget yesterday, or 2 days ago, that we are representing Nevis in the federal cabinet. But there is no portfolio that says representative for Nevis or Nevis matters.
Yes.
Right? And so, for example, when we spoke about severance pay, the Premier was quick to say, oh, that's a federal matter. When we spoke about, in the House, Cleonia spoke about non-established workers.
Yes.
He was quick to say that's a federal matter. When we talk about CBI and our share, we must ask the federal government. So really and truly, they have stated what are federal matters and what are NIA matters, and they do not ever report and say what they're doing.
Yes.
Because as a federal minister and a member of the NIA, you would seek to address, for example, non-established workers, because you know it will be beneficial to the people of Nevis. But they dismiss these things and say that's a federal matter. So what is the representation for the people of Nevis? There is none. And so the NRP has enacted in its constitution that members of the NIA are not members of the federal government. You cannot serve two masters at the same time. And ideally, under an NRP-led administration, the portfolios that NRP representatives would hold would be those that are overreaching, federal positions, so that when you work for the federal government as well as the NIA. Areas such as maritime affairs. There is no maritime affairs office in Nevis as a federal position. And so, should we have our way, civil aviation, you're supposed to be able to see the benefits of having a federal minister of civil aviation, because there's not a ministry of civil aviation in Nevis.
Yes.
And so these are the areas that you really ought to focus on when you become part of the federal government, matters that can be beneficial to both. And if it is not a space for it right now, create a space.
Yes.
Create a space so that you can represent the interests of the people of Nevis. That's my 20 cents.
It's 9 o'clock. We're at the top of the hour. We've gone half an hour. Whenever they're found wanting, they say it's a federal matter. Well, it's Carnival on St. Kitts, the 50th anniversary, and always at festivals such as these, the Calypsonians have their say. Let's listen to Queen Independent.
But the economy is broken, the government stick. Can the opposition come and take a seat? The dirt is high and employment's low, and it's the poor people who taking the blow. I say we tired, we need a revolution. We just can't depend on vaccination. I say we tired, time to pick we self off the floor. Just remember people matter more. So when you hear them talking bull on the radio, people used to matter more. Whether you red, blue, orange or yellow, people used to matter more. But when they needed us for last election, we were always there for option. But now they in and they comfortable. People don't matter no more. Why? Some people may not like this, but people used to matter more. RCCM them made a slogan out of it. People used to matter more.
Queen Independent, and none of us could have said it better. Probably on her way to her third monarch of St. Kitts and Nevis. That's what we call woman power. Now you're out there listening to a program, Your Voice with the NRP. Remember, you can join us by calling 469-1616, 469-1700. And now we're going to talk budget. I see you've got your copy in front of you, Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons. Your second sitting of a budget delivered by the Nevis Island Administration. Your take on what you heard last Tuesday.
I think really I was looking for a more futuristic budget, so to speak, because we all know we're in a COVID-19 pandemic, and globally it has been very, very challenging times, and so that is not even disputed. It's not a secret, and we all have seen the impact that COVID has had on the economy. It basically crippled our tourism industry here in Nevis, and so that is not disputed. It's no secret. But what I thought, or what I really envisioned, was that in this budget we would have seen a more strategic focus on really moving Nevis forward post-pandemic. And so I did not expect it to be an excuse, and to me I felt that it was an excuse, and I'm not being insensitive in any way, because COVID did happen, and I'm not saying that COVID doesn't matter or it didn't have an impact. What I'm saying is that if you are a visionary government and you're planning ahead, because that is what a budget is, you have to plan ahead. And so whatever situation you're facing, the role of the budget is really for you to put the adequate fiscal policies in place so that you can actually remedy that situation that you're in. You have to improve it. And so to me, I felt like the budget was just an excuse. Well, we had COVID, so we couldn't do much. And the Honorable Premier actually stated it, and he stated it quite clearly and loaded in his statement, where he said that he never envisioned in 2017, when he became the Premier of Nevis, that he would have lost 2 years due to COVID. And I took great offense to that. Now, I am not saying that there wasn't some perhaps loss of opportunities delays of plans. All of that are expected, and I think both in the private sector and the public sector, there would have been certain delays. You would have had to make some alternative plans, and people were just basically watching and waiting to see what would happen. But that is not an excuse, because it's a global pandemic. Every single leader of a country would have gone through the same experience that this administration went through. And I don't hear people making excuses to the extent that they are saying, listen, I feel like I was cheated. And I was cheated of some term or some tenure because I didn't get to do certain things that I wanted to do. Only God knows what those were, because they were not listed in the budget. And if we were to be honest, and if we were to really take this from an analytical perspective and go back and look at least at the budgets for the past 3 years, okay, even back from 2018 to 2017, the budgets really were the same. Okay, they did not promote any vision for development or growth. It's just basically a taxation budget. That's it. You tax, you collect revenue, and then you move forward. You do some sort of infrastructure development if you get around to doing it. And it was the same thing last year. I mean, this administration did not even complete 10% of what they budgeted for last year. Neither did they do that the year before. And so you had a repeat of the same thing. And I coined it as an empty budget, because to me, there wasn't any hope. There wasn't any vision for growth. How do you get your people out of this? How do you mobilize your economy? How do you get people start to work again? How do you mobilize the tourism industry? What are your plans? And this is what I was hoping to see in the budget. Do you have any plans for a capital project? Nothing. And so it came about just, again, blame. You blame the COVID, you blame the federal government, you blame NRP. For God's sake, you're even blaming Cleon for just merely existing. And it was just a blame. You sounded like a baby who just kept crying and needed pacifying with a pacifier or something. And it is about time, and I used the benchmark of 9 years. And a lot of people ask, Cleon, why did you say 9 years? But I was looking at the tenure of the CCM-led administration in government, and I had to do that strategically, because they always go back to before to the period of 2006 to 2013, and that is important, because one have to ask the question: well, which government was in which administration was in government prior to 2006, and how long were they there for? I mean, NRP came in for perhaps 1.1 term, and at that point in time, Nevis would have seen real progress, and no one can dispute that. A matter of fact, Nevians do not dispute that. They do not dispute the aggressive policies that NRP had put in place in order to drive the economy at a time when the world was suffering from not a global pandemic, but a global financial crisis. And NRP led. Joseph Parry led his administration through some difficult time, and he could have quite easily said, oh, well, we're going through a financial recession, we're going through a world crisis, so I'm losing some years. But he did not make any excuses, because that is what leadership is. Your leadership is tested during periods of adversity, when there is challenge. That is when you emerge. And so to have this premier who quote unquote said that he's ready for prime time, because he did say that he's ready and I am not ready, to have us come into this budget debate to just say, well, listen, no, I'm very sorry, but I didn't have sufficient time. I don't even know what I was supposed to do, because I haven't laid any plans on the table. Okay, we continue. We see a budget based on taxation. We see a budget where the Premier stated there will be no new jobs within no new hires in the public sector. And we saw a budget where he's saying, people, go and pay your taxes. And that was it. Nothing else, nothing for the young people of Nevis to look forward to, the single mothers, those of you who are out there struggling and dealing with domestic situations because you can't help yourself, because you can't even get a job. There was no hope in this budget for people like those. And that is what was lacking. And I do admit that these are challenging times, but you have to do something. I am a mother of two. I can't go home and say to my children, well, listen, no, we have COVID, so you can't eat. My children don't understand that I have to find a way to make it work. Whatever I have to do, I have to do it. And so these are the challenges that we are facing here in Nevis. And it is time for people to really wake up, look at the situation and make the assessment. And you have to ask yourself, if today, if you are not an avid supporter of the CCM-led administration, if your life has improved over the past 4.5 years, you have to ask yourself that question. Look at where you were 9 years ago, 4 years ago. That is the benchmark, and make a determination. Are we any better off as a people? Now, some people may be individually better off because of they are supporters of the CCM and they are being looked after. But that is not development. We have to look at the holistic approach and the country on a whole. And Mr. Manners, I can tell you, I feel like things have gotten drastically worse. And not just because of COVID, because the economy was already on a downward spiral even before COVID. And COVID really just highlighted it. And so these are the questions that Nevisians have to ask themselves collectively as a people. Are we moving forward? Because I don't get that sense that we are moving forward in this country. And the government has failed yet again, because I personally cannot even give the Premier an E for effort, because there has been no effort. So it is a resounding F for failure. And he continues to fail the people of Nevis and continue to make excuses. Now we hear him talking up and down the place about fair share. He actually mentioned it in the budget that Nevis is not getting its fair share of the CBI program. And I asked him some questions. Okay, if that is so, you are in the best position to know, because you are the Premier of Nevis and you also sit in the federal cabinet. So if that is so, what are you doing about it? Okay, it's well and enough to make a whole, hullabaloo in the entire social media and talk about it when it is convenient. But I am simply saying, is this just an election tactic? Are you playing on the emotions of Nevisians? Or do we really have a problem here? And if we do, and I want to say this, unequivocally, I am for Nevis getting its fair share, whatever it is. I don't know. Okay, but whatever it is, whatever is due to Nevisians, I believe Nevisians should get it. But what steps is the Premier taking to ensure that this fair share matter is being resolved or even being looked at? Has he put a proposal before the federal cabinet? I am told by someone in the federal cabinet that this matter was never raised in the federal cabinet. So if you come in and you're complaining to the people of Nevis, then what are we sending you down there for? It's there you're supposed to make your representation. That is where you have to make your representation be heard and felt. Don't come to us complaining, talking about, we're not getting our fair share. 3 of you down there. It is the first time in the history of Nevis that we have representation at the federal cabinet level where the CCM administration has all 3 seats. And in spite of that, they're coming up complaining, we're not getting our fair share. Okay, well, what are you going to do about that?
But Cleon, I have to say, and this is what people really need to understand, is that they are not going to sing kids as representatives for Nevis. They're in the federal cabinet, as representatives for the various ministries and portfolios that they have responsibility for in Sinkis. So I am not surprised that he was never brought up in cabinet, because there's no portfolio for CBI or for fair share.
Yes.
Right? So when the Prime Minister asked for his report from the Premier, who is also Minister of Foreign Affairs and Civil Aviation, he wants to hear about foreign affairs, how many more visa-free travel destinations do we have, what's going on with civil aviation, how come American coming from Miami is only coming twice a week and not 3-4 times a week. Those are the things that the Prime Minister would be asking of the Premier. Not and like I said, we have to create that space.
Yes.
Now, I realize at the budget hearing, Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons made reference to, the stellar performance of, Prime Minister Mia Mottley. And the next day I was surprised to see the Premier come back and went through every island in the OECS to outline what their GDP is and how St. Kitts and Nevis's GDP is better than theirs. And when you look at it, I almost said Mr. President. when you look at it, right, the same IMF report that he went and he could just Google and find indicates that the GDP per capita for St. Kitts and Nevis is US $19,000, which is 51,000 EC dollars. Did he take the time to work out how many people in Nevis are making $51,000 per month? And so when we speak about GDP on a federal level, because it's very difficult to segregate the data.
Yes.
When you speak about GDP on a federal level, and you can say St. Kitts and Nevis is in this position, we in the NRP, we say Nevis first. What is Nevis's position in this whole mix? Right? And so he went through the IMF report and, you just have to Google it. Well, guess what? I know how to Google as well. And in the same IMF report that he may have been speaking about, it indicated that the CBI, the revenues from CBI for 2020 was actually $259 million. Right? Same IMF report. He doesn't know what our fair share is. If you can quote the IMF report for all of these other things that you're trying to say St. Kitts and Nevis is better than other OECS countries, then go to the same IMF report and get the pertinent information that would put the people of Nevis in a better position. And when you look at the calculation, in the 2021 budget, he had $45 million as revenues from CBI. In the 2022 budget, he has the same $45 million from CBI. Notwithstanding all over the news, you hear about CBI flourishing and they're using alternative approaches, etc. And if you look at the $259 million highlighted in the same IMF report, that he can take the time to look at all the other countries and not point out Nevis's position.
Yes.
Well, Mr. President, I feel like, well, what you would do, you look at that 259, and if we look at the 2/3 to 1/3 ratio, then Nevis should be getting $86.3 million. If you look at a 25% ratio, Nevis should be getting $64.7 million. And if you look at a 20% ratio, Nevis should be getting $51 million. And so, how does he arrive at $45 million? He knows how to Google. He knows how to find statistics on all the other countries, but he cannot find the necessary information to help put a figure to the Prime Minister and say, based on these reports, this is, because, I can't understand how they're saying they don't know how much money is coming in. Because what is the information that you're giving to the IMF? What are they making their determinations on?
Exactly.
And so use that information. And I am saying, under an NRP-led administration, we would be looking at 1/3 of the CBI money, which would be $86.3 million, almost twice of what the Premier is settling for right now. And he's the biggest negotiator, but he cannot negotiate in the best interest of others, in the best interest of the people of Nevis. So explain to me why you keep putting $45 million and you see revenues are increasing under the CBI program.
You see, the Honorable Cleon pointed out that he did say in the Assembly, he did begin to play the blame game.
Yes.
Well, he had been doing that for months. That is one of the cards he intends to use in the next election. Also, he has begun his saber rattling
Yes.
which they've done so often. Anytime there's an election, it's think it's fought. But as you said, there's nothing futuristic that you could see. And you granted him the fact that we're in a COVID environment. But we spoke earlier about Anguilla.
Yes.
They're in COVID too. But American Airlines is showing faith in what they're doing, trusting in the government's ability to move things forward. Now, one of the reasons why I think that it's difficult for the CCM to be futuristic is that geothermal, for instance, the switch has been lost in empty promises, forever moving goalposts. One and only hotel which was supposed to come at Indian Castle is buried in the rubble that they've been dumping down there for years. And the Premier intends this Sunday to launch his campaign for 2021 with the opening of the Pinnis Park, hiring all of 12 persons. I walk on Pinnis Beach every morning and stop by there, and several of the employees are former Four Seasons employees who have not worked for the last 16 months. Now, you know, in a press conference, the Premier couldn't say how many people out of sixth form were out of work. He couldn't tell the reporter what's the unemployment rate. And I guarantee you that if 6 young, bright Nevisians approach him as he walks around next Sunday shaking hands and smiling, ask for an employment, he will tell them that the Ramada opened in St. Kitts. The Pinnis Park is hiring all of 12 persons. No futuristic plans for the island. How do we move forward? What are some of the things you expected to hear that you didn't hear that will help Nevis to make a quantum leap into the future? Because we have to be thinking along that line.
We must, and you know, you mentioned they've lost the switch, the geothermal switch. When you look at all the countries across the Caribbean, they're in a very good position at this time to capitalize on funding through the Paris Agreement and the Green Climate Fund. I noticed that the incumbent for number 4 would have snickered and spoke about how difficult it is to get funding for different projects under these different funding. And of course, if you don't know how to ride a bike, it'll be difficult for you. And so, one of the islands that they pointed to was St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Yes.
And just to show you, in 2020, just last year, the St. Vincent Electricity Company would have identified a $10.2 million project to advance renewable energy in St. Vincent. And out of that, they would have received $8.6 million from loans of low interest rate, 2 to 3%. They would have received grant funding of $3.1 million. For a $10.2 million project, renewable energy project in St. Vincent, the government of St. Vincent only had to provide $1.5 million. Right? And so, looking at what is critical at this point, which is reducing carbon dioxide emissions, and even looking at your national policies. The energy policy in St. Kitts and Nevis right now speaks to 100% renewable energy within a certain time frame. Caribbean Development Bank and these other funding agencies, they have their action plans and their work plans that speaks to assisting countries in achieving renewable energy. And so I am not certain what rate they would have gotten the $6 million loan to purchase a engine, but I cannot see where an entity such as CDB, who themselves are moving away from diesel fuel, would be providing funding at any concessionary rates. And so while we look at what is happening and people are saying, oh, it's difficult and these things take 4 years and 8 years and etc. to happen, that is when you're really out of touch and you do not understand how you can move your country forward in tandem with regional and international indices, etc.
Yes, and Dr. Daniel, the reason for that, and I find this administration to be too laid back, too complacent, and I would have advocated numerous times that in order to lead Nevis forward and be futuristic, especially when it comes to development and renewable energy and things like that, you need a specialized advice. You cannot continue to rely on your peers of finance. I mean, we have passed that, and I have said it time and time again, and it's no offense to anybody. I am not knocking anyone. I am just simply saying that it would have been prudent and it would have been most beneficial to Nevis if at the same time, while we were focusing on COVID and we had the health task force in place, if we had implemented an economic task force. That is what is needed. You need expert guidance. You see what Dr. Janice Daniel just spoke about? She's an expert in that field. And so she can give the necessary technical and expert guidance that is needed. The NIA needs that technical advice from persons, so they need advisors. You cannot just go and employ community advisors who don't even have the qualification or the experience to guide anybody.
But not to cut you understand, they pointed out that the NRP had 7 advisors, and that's why the NRP was able to do so well. They're saying, oh, we don't need advisors, we know it all. How can you know it all? And that is why the country is fumbling right now.
Yes.
And not only that, the Honorable Cleo indicated earlier that there is divided attention. 60% maybe to St. Kitts, the federal, and 40% to Nevis.
Yes.
So it's even more crucial to have people in your corner who can help to shape the policy and move the country forward.
And that is why we need a caring government, because a caring government would not have established a role in the civil servants for a community advisor who does nothing but political campaigning. These are serious times. These are hard times where you have to move the country forward. So if it is that this premier and his administration was really ready for prime time and the big stage, as he said he is, you would have seen a more sensible approach to our economic recovery here at Nevis. But he's not ready yet. And the concern here, what Nevisians needs to realize is that we have to go beyond winning elections. Okay, this is not a soap opera where you just want to win and everybody grandstanding. I see the community advisor. Reports are given daily where she spends most of her time in bars in Coddick Road on government time. And that cannot sit well with the people of Nevis, because this is somebody who is paid at the high end of the scale with the public resources. And so you spend most of your time campaigning for what? For what? To win what? That's certainly not going to happen. And so we need serious people. We need people with expertise. We need people who have the technical advice, the knowledge. One of the things that Prime Minister Motley did when she assumed prime ministership, she put an economic team together. And you know who was on that team? Former Prime Minister Owen Arthur. And that is because she had the sense to know, listen, my country needs this type of direction, this type of guidance. I may not have it within my cabinet, but I can put a team together who can help me put my people forward.
Country
And we're not seeing this. We're not seeing this. And Nevisians have to wake up and stop accepting mediocrity. There's no excuse for it, because you have people out there with the same education, the same talent, the same experience who can come in and do a better job. And we just need the people of Nevis to understand that you have to give us a chance. We are being labeled, and every time you go back, I cannot be held responsible for what former Premier Parry did some 10 years ago. Janice cannot be held responsible for those things. We are presenting you with a different set of people with different values, different mindset, different objectives, people who genuinely want to see Nevis move forward, people who care. One of the things that is lacking here in Nevis is leadership where there is respect for humanity. And I can say it boldly. I look at the premier in the budget address and I had to smile because I thought to myself, this is so childish and juvenile. Really, those were my thoughts. Because here it is. You have a grown man who is almost maybe 20 years my senior. And I say almost because I don't know the age. But I know there's a significant age gap. I am the youngest person next to Honorable Troy Livard, who might have me maybe by 4 or 5 years. I'm not sure. The youngest person in that parliament, and I cannot say that I could have really looked to any example or any role model in that entire sitting, not even from the speaker. And I wish to take some time out to address that issue with the speaker because, since my experience in the parliament, and I'm just saying, I am young. I am perhaps the most inexperienced. This was my second time around. So I do not see myself as a threat to an entire government to sit on the other side. And so when you have this speaker who is going to advance arguments made by a member, I was most applaud when that matter was raised, where the premier in his rebuttal stated that Patrice Nisbet should be held accountable and responsible for some bounce check that happened how many moons ago. I was shocked that the Speaker of the House would allow such assassination of the young man's character in the House of Parliament, particularly when he wasn't there to defend himself. And I want people to understand that if it is that you can hold a former member of the federal cabinet for NRP responsible for an event that happened when there was a CCM-led administration government in power, and we all know, those of us who know the banking system, we know it's very difficult to bounce a check for the government. So the question has to be asked, well, what role did the CCM-led NIA play in that misfortune? They must have played a role. People are not stupid. And so if you're going to hold the NRP lone parliamentarian at the federal level at that time for something like that, pure speculation, no evidence, then surely, now that we have 3 ministers of the NIA government sitting in the federal cabinet, then who else are we supposed to hold responsible for Nevis not getting its fair share? Surely it has to be them. So if it is that you can advance that argument in one spectrum, then the same has to apply. And so I want the people of Nevis to understand that there is no one else, if it is that the Premier's theory is true, who Nevisians can hold responsible for Nevis not getting its fair share, other than the 3 ministers who sit in the federal cabinet. And more so, the Premier himself, who would have drafted the Charlestown Accord. Yes.
And would have been a significant player in the federal government when it was just him there. And so when you look at these issues, and what's good for the goose is good for the gander, really it must be that way. Now, we're speaking about what we really would have liked to see in the budget. What would we want to see to be able to give people some hope?
Yes.
We keep speaking about the standard of living. We keep speaking about the cost of living. What is being done to reduce the cost of living here in Nevis? It is one thing when the cost of living is high, but you have jobs that you can earn an income and get by. But when job opportunities are scarce, when the cost of living is high, what can we expect in Nevis? And so we are saying these are the things that we must look at. We have spoken, and we keep speaking about the renewable energy, because this is an area where we can really make a big difference in the lives of many Nevisians, businesses, as well as people at home. with regards to looking at the cost of electricity. It is the biggest cost that many homes have to provide, many businesses have to pay for. And we have seen where geothermal was pretty much at the fingertips, but not only geothermal being there, but nothing has been done with regards to renewable energy. And when we look at the budget, I turned immediately to the section, they have tourism and environment, and I looked and I looked and I looked, and under that section there's nothing about the environment. And we know that the environment is really a big driver for economic development in these times, especially in small island developing states. And so when we look at the budget, you don't see much about the environment, you don't see anything about climate change, you don't see the need for renewable energy. And so these are the areas that we need to be looking at. And the focus must be, how can we make living, how can we make life in Nevis easier for the people living here? And there's nothing in this budget that leans towards that area.
Now
sorry,
you're going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that in this budget, I presented an alternative budget, an NRP-led budget, because we will do things differently.
Well, I'll tell you. Just hold that for a bit.
Yes.
Wait you for a break. But I couldn't help but smile on the day of the budget. Your colleague, J.D. Keynes, said this on Facebook. First, it was keep the momentum. Then it was regain the momentum. Now it's recapture the momentum. When will the CCM admit that there's no momentum at all? Let's hear from Lady Independent. She knows exactly what the state of play is.
I say we tired, Max say keep the momentum. Oh, Mr. Premier, where we get the energy from. I say we tired, time to protect the poor. Just remember, people matter more.
They've clearly forgot their slogan of the last elections, that people matter more. We've got 24 minutes, moving up to 10. That's all the time we've got on a Monday night here in the studios of Vaughan Radio. Whether you're at home, in the diaspora, give us a call, 469-1616, 469-1700. We know that you are soaking up the very interesting debate we're having, but this is about you. This is about representation. This is about governance. Honorable Cleon Stapleton, you provided an alternative budget.
Yes, I did.
Tell us about it.
And so the budget that was presented really was how NRP-led administration would really better serve the people of Nevis. And one of the first things that we have to do a diagnostic analysis of our economy. And so that is where you need the technical and expert advice, the advisors, the people who are going to guide you through this difficult time, because we have to go on a recovery path. Okay? You got injured, you suffered, you are now getting the treatment, and you have to now recover. It's just natural. And so the NRP I put forward several things that NRP would do. Nevis definitely need a capital project. And I have to be careful here, because I don't really want to put all of NRP plans out there, because we know people like imitation and carbon copy, and we are in an election year. So I want to be very cautious, but we are mindful, and so the people of Nevis can be rest assured that we have looked at certain things that are plaguing divisions. When you look at your water bill, and I want to talk a little bit about water here tonight, because I looked at the audit report that was presented in the House for 2019, and quite surprisingly, in that report there was an audit done specifically of the water department, and that audit was carried out by the audit department, and there was a compliance report that indicated that the water department itself, so it falls under the portfolio of Minister Brand. It needs dire attention, because there are some issues there where the bills and the collections of monies, they are not being reconciled. And so, having read that, the report itself, basically and blatantly states that there are a number of management issues within the water department that range from staffing to staff not being paid properly, to staff who really not a part of the water department itself, who find themselves on the water department payroll. You cannot reconcile the receipts, and so there wasn't a clear indication of the revenue that was collected. And so the auditors are saying we are having some challenges here because there isn't that audit trail when it comes to the receipts and the revenue. Things are just not adding up. And so here it is, we have a minister sitting and saying that, he is bringing sterling service, and he has improved the water infrastructure here on Nevis, and perhaps there may have been some improvement, but in terms of the revenue collection, or in terms of the management of the affairs of the water department, that is lacking. And the auditors were clear, and they blatantly stated that these things need to be addressed. And it is so amazing, Steve, because early this year, we would have seen the implementation despite, and I want Nevians don't forget this. Last year in the budget presentation, Nevians were told that there will be no new taxes. Okay? But continuously throughout the year, we saw a number of taxes being increased, ranging from solid waste again.
They use fees, they're not taxes.
Whatever it is, if it wasn't there before, it's new. And the water rates increased drastically by, and I said it time and time, over 200%, to the extent that your bill is now more than your usage. What you pay in a mandatory tax on your water bill, it's more than your usage. Can you imagine that in this 21st century? And so the first thing that the NRP is going to look at doing, we have to remove all of these unnecessary taxes that just put in economic hardship on people and doesn't make sense. And the reason why people are being taxed in this way is simply because the government cannot come up with creative ways in order to raise revenue. That is what is lacking. We assertive leadership. And so some people think that being a leader is all about grandstanding and how much nice suits and socks and the best smile and whether you're the brightest and yes, deferring your salary and how much you can announce and your diction and how bright you be and whether you went to Oxford or all of that is not relevant. What is relevant is how can you make life easy? How can you ease the burden for Nevians? And if you cannot do that, then really you're just wasting people's time. And that is what we have seen with this present leader, wasting people's time. You're ready for prime time, you say you are the best of everything, and perhaps you are, because sometimes I wonder whether it's he or Jesus. I think sometimes the roles may shift. But here it is that you are so good at everything other than moving your country forward. And that is what is needed. And so with our NRP-led administration, the first thing we are going to do, some of these taxes that are just really creating hardship for people, such as that water tax, that would definitely have to be removed. We have to look at that. There are other means to raise revenue. We have, when you go out, and we were talking earlier about the port and the water taxi, you have a mandatory $5 that you have to pay. Now, the ferry port at Owali, that is something that was constructed by the government using the taxpayers' money. And so if the taxpayers' money, all the taxpayers already paid for that, paid for that infrastructure, why it is I have to be able, when I go want to use the port, I have to give you another $5 to do what? I already paid for it. And so here it is, we have the poor people of Nevis being taxed to death. We really cannot take any more. Soon you're going to be taxed for just merely breathing in this country. And it's a serious thing, and I want the people of Nevis, the young people, to realize what is taking place. Because if the government cannot find ways of really raising revenue, bringing new money into this country, then we are going to continue a system of taxation. And the NRP, we have to put a stop to that. That has to stop.
One of the things we say, especially with regards to young people, is, again, once you know the direction in which you're going, then the development of our youths must be aligned with the direction in which the country is going. And so if we're speaking about, renewable energies, so to speak, if we're speaking about, agricultural development for exports, if we're talking about developing creative policies, progressive policies to guide and to attract investors, then you must be able to align the development of the youth in that direction. We spoke about the education system a while back, and what progress have we made with regards to education in Nevis at the tertiary level? We, at one point, UWI had an interest in having an open classroom here, or outdoor classroom with regards to renewables, etc.
Yes.
Why cannot we take the lead and develop that type of educational environment so that people can come from different areas? There is a situation with the MUA right now where they have a monopoly, but medical school, that's not the only educational opportunity.
Yes.
And so there are others that we can look at, and based on our geothermal resource, our solar resource, our wind resource, etc., Nevis has the ideal opportunity, and we speak about expanding and developing our natural resources. This is an area where we can lead the Caribbean in terms of training people. We speak about all of the solar energy, and you're going to need people trained to install and to repair and to maintain these systems. And so create the educational opportunities so that they can then feed into the vision that we have for moving Nevis in terms of a sustainable island.
And one of the things I mentioned in the budget, we would have seen, and they reported on the completion of the TVEC wing at the Gingerland Secondary School, and in the budget there was provision for a TVEC to be placed at the CSS, Charleston Secondary School, at a projected cost of $6 million. Now, if you are planning purposefully, right, it might have been prudent. And I mean, everyone said that, you can have different approaches. But at the end of the day, you have to look at the best approach that will bring more benefit to you as a country. And so it perhaps would have made more sense to just have one tertiary level skills center. Something where you're promoting skills at all levels, and something where the high school children can use, those who are involved in adult education. I mean, you can even partner with universities. And we cannot forget the important role, that collaborative role that tertiary education plays when it comes to small business development. And so our people need to be trained. And so we could have taken that to a higher level. And that is something that the NRP or NRP-led administration would have looked at and would have implemented. And so if it is that the elections are very early next year, we are certainly going to put that's something that we are going to look at, because I think it is time for Nevis to really to have a high-end tertiary education facility that focus not only on the academics but the skills, the technology, and that is something that is needed. And so these are things that we are putting out there that would advance the lives of Nevisians. We want to give people the opportunity so that they can grow. We want to teach our people how to fish. Okay, we do not want to continue this culture where people feel they have to rely on government handouts. And so you see people up and down campaigning and giving people money and giving them drinks. And, you know, our society is not a welfare society. We want to teach our people how to fish so that they can be able to sustain themselves.
I think we've got a caller. 10 minutes to 10. Caller, you're on. Good night.
Good evening, Stephen. Good evening to the panel. I just called to endorse the proposition being made by Representative Cleon. I think it's just bad use of money, and Dr. Janice Daniel has been talking about the lack of planning. It's a classic case of being totally at sea with regard to technical education. The idea must be what Representative Cleon is saying, to establish one center, have the training available to students in the daytime, and fellows like Steve who might want to learn plumbing in the evening will go up there in the evening so that he could fix his own pipe on the bus, and Representative Cleon might want to learn to sew,
Of
and
course.
so on. And Representative Janice would want to learn to do something else like cake decoration and something, and cooking, specialized cooking. But you have it open in the evening, and critically, you connect it to international institutions like DeVry, or international institutions, even in Jamaica, the College of Art, Science and Technology, which becomes now the University of Technology, and the Trinidad has a technical university, University of Trinidad and Tobago. So when you get a certificate, you get a certificate that is accredited by an international school. What's very clear carefully, if there is at the center, now that has been built, where are the technical people for the instructions? What is the level of skill set that we expect to get? Are we going to get something at the level of the journeyman level, or like the city and guilds, and also at the higher level? And where is the equipment? Is the equipment ready? Are we ready to? Is it ready to roll in January? I think we have to get to the government quick before the government takes another $6 million and dump it on the one at Charleston Secondary. So I hope they call the election early so that the NIB could get to government to rescue this situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you,
And I think
caller.
the point that is being made by everybody is that there's no new thinking. There's nobody pushing the envelope to make sure that we are moving forward. This government appears to have at its only remit building roads as smooth as a baby's bottom. But the people in the country demand much more than that.
Yes.
And in terms of bringing new money in, is the time right that a boat or the boats at the Oli taxi pier be dispatched not only to Reggae Beach, but out on the horizon to look for the investors that we were promised?
It's interesting that you mentioned the Wally Pier. Again, going back to what was said in the budget with regards to the pier being constructed there, I would have listened to the need to develop a fisheries facility over at Long Point, because there's a concern with the boats being parked on the side of the road. And I was approached to do an EIA for the pier at Wally, but I have certain standards with the work that I do. And when you pass in that area right now, there is no way that that project should have been approved without appropriate parking. Any private developer would have been required to provide the necessary parking off-road. If it meant acquiring additional lands or whatever needed to be done. But you must be able to meet certain minimum standards, and no parking is definitely, not something that that you would want to have the way that the situation is right now. And so I'm eager to see how that matter is going to be addressed. It's very hazardous, and it ought not be in that way. It is not because I was, I think he said I found all kind of excuses. I did the EIA for the Penny's Park project, and that was a very challenging EIA because of the area that is there. But I knew that I could get the information and what was required to make the development, a more sustainable one. I did the EIA for the seabridge, the docks on both sides. And so when you have no standards and you just jump and do things in any old-fashioned way, that's what's going to happen. You get these type of projects that are incomplete. I'm hoping, I understand that there are plans to demolish and rebuild the agricultural office complex, and I'm hoping that there is some planning put in place, because we have Nevis not too far by, and if we're really going to advance in the area of solar energy, you want to be able to have sufficient area close by so that you can tie in, it would be less expensive to tie in the solar energy power to the Nevis. And so because the agricultural building is there, I'm hoping that they're looking at the much larger picture, and not just as the Treasury building was erected exactly where it was, out of character with the existing town area. And so when you do not have the planning that you need to have, you end up with a TVEX in Gingerland, one in Charlestown. You end up with a congested town, no adequate parking. Where is the parking for the Treasury building in town?
Well, breaking news. Today, Monday, December 13th, for the first time in 23 months, after that Inland Revenue building was opened officially, January 30th, 2020, they're now allowing traffic to flow from the market up to wrap around the DR Walvin Plaza. It took them all of 23 months. The loss of gasoline for people like me who come in from the Gingerland area, come up the Market Road, having to go on the Samuel Hunkins Drive to head back to Gingerland. Lack of planning, as you've said. We've got only 5 minutes to go, and so we'll take our final break. When we come back, you'll tell us what your plans are for the rest of the year, and we'll be looking forward to 2022, which we know will be a big year in Nevis and a big year for the NRP.
But the economy is broken, the government stick. Can the opposition come and take a seat? The debt is high and employment low, and it's the poor people who taking the blow. I say we tired, we need a revolution. We just can't depend on vaccination. I say we tired, time to pick we self off the floor. Just remember people matter more. So when you hear them talking bull on the radio, people used to matter more. Whether you red, blue, orange or yellow, people used to matter more. But when they needed us for last election, we were always there for option. But now they in and they comfortable. People don't matter no more. Why? Some people may not like this, but people used to matter more. RCCM them made a slogan out of it. People used to matter more.
Okay, people used to matter more, but no more. Now we've got 3 minutes to take us to the top of the hour. Party leader, what can we look forward to next week? I think we've got a caller, so let's go to the line. Caller, you've waited very late in the evening. Good evening.
Yes, good night. I won't be too long. Make call from Montserrat.
Oh, nice to have you from the Emerald Isle.
Yes, J.D. Keynes is the one who got me here. He stole my heart.
A wonderful
Tonight
lady.
I hear,
Number one and number one.
Talk like this one. Go ahead.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, me no hear politics talk like this one long time. So Next week. Are you come on next week?
We're here every Monday, 8:30 to
well,
10, and we take it to a higher level.
Next week, make a couple questions for us.
Definitely. We look forward to taking your call.
Good, good.
Good. Nice calling from all the way from the Emerald Isle. So we've got 2 minutes. What have we got next week?
So next week, individually, the candidates, of course, are continuing with their community outreach and reaching out to the people. We are hoping to have our Christmas get-together on the 18th, and we are also continuing to reach out to people. I have been, for example, in Butlers. I've heard what their concerns are, and really getting ready, getting ourselves prepared, encouraging people to go out and get registered to vote. A number of persons have already indicated that they haven't registered before, but they're going to do it now. I'm telling people it is better to be registered now, and if when the time comes you decide you don't want to vote, but go ahead and get registered now, and then you can make that decision after. So continuing with the campaign and getting people to understand that it's really about the people and in improving their living conditions and their cost of living.
You've got only 10 seconds, Honorable Cleo.
Yes, well, we continue with the community outreach, as Johnny said. We want to ask people to continue to accommodate us. I wish to take this opportunity to really thank my constituents who have been very supportive, and I ask them to continue to place their trust and confidence in me and to definitely send me back to Parliament. And so I just want to take this opportunity to wish everyone a happy Christmas, a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I want to say that we are going to continue to fight for Nevisions, fight for a better life for Nevisions.
Like the caller said from Montserrat, a long time you ain't hear politics talk like this. You two have been fantastic. Leader Janice Daniel Hodge, the Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons, it was an absolute pleasure having you as we share views, ideas for advancing our country with the people of Nevis. You've been listening to Your Voice with the NRP. We'll be back next week. Good night.
Your voice, your voice, your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis